Hey, what up, y'all? It's another episode. How y'all doing today? It's me, your boy Samuel, riding solo today. Just it's a warm day here in Mobile, Alabama. This is the way the weather is down here. Starts getting warm early, so uh, I'm completely used to it now. I mean, I've been here about 3 years. And I know that coming from back home in Nebraska, there's nothing like such a climate change. I mean, it's almost drastic. But anyway, hope all y'all are having a good day. It's Monday. I'm gonna upload this probably tomorrow, so hopefully you've had a good Tuesday. I mean, whatever the case may be, good to see you again. I want to shout out some new subscribers. I want to thank y'all so much. When I started doing this, I literally had like 9 subscribers, and those subscribers that came from a show long, long time ago that I completely neglected and things like that. And so my viewership is picking up. I'm happy about that. It's very small. It's YouTube, so I mean that's what's gonna happen. You have to get yourself fit into an algorithm, so to speak. So um, I'm very humble, even just for the few that have joined. I'm now up to 36 subscribers. Slow but steady wins the race. So it is what it is. I don't have really a particular topic today. Just gonna kind of talk and just get some things off my chest, and some of my little weird experiences, you know, being in this town. And I was driving the other day, and I don't know if anyone's ever drove here in Mobile, but this is some of the worst traffic I've ever been a part of. I mean, I've lived in a lot of places, and I'm telling you, this fucking shit is crazy down here. Um, and then there are service roads where there don't need to be service roads, and if you need to get the fuck over, you can't. And so there's all these problems, all these issues, and there's all these accidents. And what people have to understand is that Mobile is in between. It's on I-10, so anywhere along the Gulf, you got Pensacola, Destin, I mean, then that's if you go west, that takes you straight into Florida. And then, or if you go east, rather, if you go east. But then if you go like west, you go, excuse Apollo for a moment. Excuse him for 1 second. So anyhow, heading west, you've got New Orleans, and before that, I mean, you got Gulfport, New Orleans, all the way over to Houston. And so um, you have a whole mixture of drivers that come through here. And so I would just say it's probably some of the worst traffic I've ever been a part of. I mean, no one understands how to use middle lanes. School buses stop on major highways and or major thoroughfares in the city, and people are supposed to stop on a dime for them. I mean, it's really weird. And so with all that, I've learned how to kind of take my time um, with driving. When I was younger, I couldn't avoid a speeding ticket. I think a lot of us know this type of stuff. We came from that background. Couldn't avoid it no matter what. I couldn't avoid a speeding ticket no matter what I did. I was always speeding or not riding legit because I didn't think it was important. And that stuff really is important, especially as you get older and you're thinking about things like insurance and whatnot. And so I'm driving the other day, and all these cars are zooming by me, and then a couple of realizations take place, I end up thinking like, okay, I'm the old guy driving the car now. I'm pushing 50. I'm the old guy driving the car. And I used to always wonder when I was younger why older people drove so slow. And I get it. I get it finally. It's because, the amount of insurance you have to pay, especially when you get older, you get a nicer car, so the insurance is a little higher. And, you know, um, you start really being careful about tickets and unnecessary financial expenses. And it's one of those rites of passage almost when you get to that realization that your thinking is like that. It doesn't necessarily mean you're getting old, but it means you're maturing, I suppose. But it was just funny to me because I just came up with this whole concept when I was sitting there driving, and it was very interesting. So I decided to reach out to some family members today, and that's always kind of been tough for me. Um, I've done this a few times, and it never really goes well for me. And I guess I was just wondering, why do we go through that, if that makes sense? A lot of us have issues with our family, and we stay away from them. We don't stay in contact, and we don't feel appreciated, and then something just makes us reach out. And I think the difference now is that I have no expectations of anything. Um, they have a perception about me that, you know, it's almost like I'm mythological. I'll be honest. I'm not trying to be narcissistic, but nobody's ever understood why I moved the way I moved, or anything really about me. Um, Everybody's got their own things going on, and I get it, but I've had a lot of great things happen in my life that none of them were ever a part of, even when I reached out. And then there were fallings out over petty things, and you know, a lot of things my dad did. That whole adage, "the sins of the father are visited upon the son," that really does happen because people in my family just, they were really indifferent toward my dad, and he had his reasons, to be that way, or they had their reasons rather to feel like that about him. He wasn't the easiest person to deal with, and so a lot of the things that he did, they like took out on me, and it was subconscious. It was like in their psyche. I don't even think it was not something they willingly decided to do. It's just who they were. And like I had mentioned in my first episode, never really truly felt like I fit in that family, and really anywhere for that matter. And so I wonder if it's like a cause and effect thing. Like, because they did me like that, is that what affected, my relationships with people and friends, and, any type of relationship with people down the road? Because I've always felt, to a degree, like I'm expecting disappointment. You know what I mean? And that's not always the case, but that mindset is there, and it's so hard to shake. And so I'm going into this with no expectations. I guess I just really want to see how everyone's doing. I haven't heard anything. There's a lot of people that certainly don't know that I moved here, and I've been here 3 years. So that's weird in and of itself, But whatever the case may be, I've always been a low key type person anyway. And it was my grandma that taught me that. My grandma was always friendly with her neighbors, but she was never really friends. And I find myself being like that too. I just feel like, the more people know about you, the more that they have stuff to use against you. And so I never, and not that I've ever done anything, but any little thing, anytime you open up, anytime you open up and are candid, on a personal level, like with neighbors and stuff like that. Like even on here, I mean, I'll generally talk about most stuff, but there's so many things I would never ever bring up on air. You know, that those are just things that are off limits, and I've had neighbors that have literally told me other people's business in the neighborhood, and it's like once you start telling me other people's business, then what makes you think I'm going to tell you anything, because you're probably talking to someone else about me the same way. And so I never was really big on stuff like that, sharing too much with people. Even relationships with like Facebook, like got a lot of people like, I didn't know you got married. Well, that's private. That's my business. I've just always been like that. Other people are like that, and nobody questions it. And I'm like that because my life has been a bunch of moving parts. And anytime I've ever displayed anything publicly, there's always been, like backlash or something that's misunderstood. There's always some shit, and I can't speak for my back in the day shenanigans and things that, went back and forth. Not necessarily all one person's fault or whatever like that. But, just things in general, that I've always thought that your life should somewhat be private on social media. Especially coming from a time where I came from, where there was no pictures of shit we did. There was no pictures. If you went to a bonfire and got completely faded and stuff like that, and your high school teacher showed up, like nobody, nobody thought nothing of it, and so I was fortunate enough to come from that generation, and y'all know what I'm talking about. So don't act like it was just me, but those of us that do come from that time understand. I do find that I do find that my generation, from that particular era in technology, are for the most part pretty private. Even if they post on, Facebook regularly, it's there's usually an angle with it. There's usually, some people post a lot about their families, but they don't post a lot about their day to day struggles, and they don't have to, and they shouldn't, that stuff is for positivity. I think there's not necessarily just for positivity, but I think some of the bullshit, some of y'all need to keep to yourselves. Like seriously, sometimes y'all post stuff and it's just like you see so much of it. It's just like it's constant complaining, and it's just kind of like, you know, and I mean like personal complaining. I'm not talking about like entertainment shows or things like that. I'm talking about like people personally posting how much either their dating life sucks, how much they're misunderstood, or there's always some shit. There's every one of you know what I'm talking about. There's always somebody who just doesn't quite have it together, and you just think, freak, fuck, fuck. Would you? Would somebody treat this girl right, or somebody treat this dude right, so they can quit complaining on Facebook all the time? Um, it's just crazy the amount of personal stuff that people post, and I've been guilty of it, especially when that like memories part pops up. I look back at some of that stuff, and I'll tell some of y'all out there, I am sorry. I kind of let the cat out of the bag on a lot of stuff, and probably should have kept my mouth shut too. So um, I'm not absolved from the critique. So, but hey, that's what makes me a better person, right? Is that I can self check. You gotta learn how to be able to check yourself. But yeah, we just live in a different time, and you know, was talking to my wife about something, and she goes, "You are of a rare generation that you lived through 6 decades before the age of 50." And I was like, I really thought about it, and I was like, yeah, that's actually true. And I guess that's called zennials or something to the effect. And what's interesting about that, and I always tell people that, especially people younger than me, that we were a generation that went through a complete shift, of technology. And it was fast. Like, before a lot of us, there were generations that had never seen the internet. They had always known the standard way of communication, and there's some of us that have actually seen the standard way of communication with the telephone, even before the voicemail. I remember when the voicemail was brand new, and then the voicemail, then it was caller ID, and you're like, wow, that's crazy. And then all of a sudden they were talking fiber optic networks, and you're like, they're putting wires in the ground all over. Like, this was all like a mind blow in such a short time. And sometimes I wonder, why did technology blow up so fast in such a short amount of time? But anyhow, we went from voicemail and caller ID to picture phones and car phones. I remember there was a old talk show from back in the day, and they had things that were supposed to be, coming out in the future, and it was like a phone. It was a huge, like, desk phone, and on this desk phone was a screen, and you could pick it up, talk to the person, and you'd see this really choppy black and white screen of somebody. And I remember the audience just being like, ooh, oh shit, wow. And it was just kind of like, then, it was cutting edge, and it was just kind of like, whoa. Or when, like, we got Atari and there was Pong, and before that, all you had was board games. There was nothing you could do on the TV. And the one before Atari was ColecoVision. Okay, so in my neighborhood, all the guys who hustled were able to afford that, if you know what I mean. I gotta be sensitive for social media sensibilities, but those were the people that were able to afford that where I was from. And so technology just took this huge boost. And so my children don't know what any of that was like. And my youngest just turned 20. And so it's just kind of like they grew up in a whole era where they don't know anything about a landline phone or a rotary dial phone or any of that. And you just really start to get a grasp on your own humanity, if that makes sense. Like, I was, scrolling social media today, and they had an interview with Lisa Kudrow, and she was talking about her time on Friends, and someone was asking her, they were asking her about, of all the things she's done, is she okay with always being known for doing Friends? And she was totally okay with it. And it really is an interesting interview. I would go look at it. Shout out to CBS News. They're the ones who did the interview. And so the thing that struck me the most was looking at how much she aged. And I don't mean in a bad way. I just mean she's aged, and it's like, it never really hits you about how fast life goes. We hold on to grudges. We maintain the same ridiculous habits, and we think we got all this time. And we don't. Time is precious. You know, time is very precious and very sacred. And it sounds like a cliche, but believe me, before you know it, it's most of it's gone. You know, and it's little things like that. You know, seeing that interview, and it really starts to hit you. You know, thinking about the people that you hung out with, and that you partied with, and had relationships with, and like they're no longer here. And I mean, not in your life. I mean, no longer here. And I tell people, cherish every moment. I mean, it sounds corny, but people really don't get it. And I see all these people spending so much of their time and their energy arguing about things that are really inconsequential at the beginning of the day, about in regards to how it personally affects you. It's like, take care of your own and take care of what you have in front of you, and then that makes its way, it radiates. It's like my grandmother used to say, charity starts at home and then it spreads abroad. She used to always say that, if you're doing right in your own home, if you're doing right by the people you live with, if you're being completely honest and if you're being candid and transparent about your life, if you all love each other, and if you're all doing the right thing, that's gonna build, within, and it can't help but disperse itself when you go out to the world. It's about the energy. It's about the energy, and you actually control that energy more than you think, and so, but I don't think people try. I think that they're so sensitive to the first few things that happen, like for instance, you wake up in the morning and then you're like, first I spilled my coffee and I just knew it was going to be a shit day after that. And it's like, well, yeah, because you've manifested that energy. I really believe that, and sometimes I've had mornings where I've started and it's been like the exact same way, and I've had to like literally take a break and check myself and be like, okay, we're not doing this morning. This is not how we're starting out the day. Get yourself together. People are afraid to internalize. That's what it is. A lot of people are afraid to internalize. Like the whole time, you have control over your faculties. You have control over who you are. But most of the time, people make excuses. Every time they do something, the devil made me do it, or it's because this, or it's because that. And nobody has any real control. And people have to get back to learning how to have real control. But their egos get involved. They don't look like a punk. They don't want to. I don't know. I don't know. So much of what we deal with is dependent on how we choose to look at things and how we choose to handle them. And you guys all know that. Like, you've been in a situation where you're like, that was a nothing thing that turned into this something completely unreasonable and out of pocket. And it's like nobody has, nobody wants to have real control. But for those that do, we're a different breed, because some things we would never ever do, but they certainly are fun to think about, and I think a lot of us can agree to that. Like, if you're an imaginative person, sometimes that's enough, and then you just leave it. You leave it lie. But a lot of things just aren't worth it, I guess. So, I don't know. It is what it is. I told you guys this show wasn't really gonna have a particular subject. I'm just gonna talk about some stuff, some musings and things like that. And you know, not everything needs to be super serious all the time and stuff like that. So there's a garage sale not far away from my house. I'm thinking about stopping up there and looking up there and seeing what they got. They've gotten a lot of traffic, like seriously. But again, that would require me getting to know my neighbors, and then that we've already had that whole discussion about that. So March Madness going on. I'm happy to say Nebraska has made it to the Sweet 16 men's basketball. That is almost unheard of, or that's actually unheard of for Nebraska football. Baseball's doing well there too. It's interesting how the shift in sports, there's a dynamic shift, but I'm happy for the Huskers, happy to see them get there. Hopefully, they can get far and really change the outlook of that program. And then the Crimson Tide, they're in the Sweet 16 as well. So who knows? There could be some interesting matchups in this one. So this is going to be very, very interesting. I really am not a big fan of the NBA. I've always been a fan of college basketball. I feel like that's where the true talent is, and I don't know. I've just always been a more of a fan of college basketball. I think the modern state of the NBA is absolute trash. We can. I don't want to get into the LeBron and Jordan thing, but I'm just saying. I mean, the classifications for me to consider someone a GOAT, I take back to Eminem's line in the song "Till I Collapse," and he says, "A plaque and platinum status is whack if I'm not the baddest." And so it's like LeBron has this many rings. LeBron has, records where he's outpaced Jordan, I believe. And it's like, right, but how many teams did we do that with? And when we weren't happy, what happened? We didn't like certain players, what happened? And it was like, the one thing that people could say about Jordan is that they may not have liked him as a person, but they certainly respected what he could do on the court. And you didn't hear of all this bickering and whatnot back then. And if you did, it was very small. But those people won championships together, like Shaq and Kobe. Everybody knows they didn't get along, but they won championships together. And so that's what I judge greatness off of. Is greatness isn't how many points you score, or how many minutes you've played in a game, or how many threes you've hit. But greatness is who you were. When you had 100 some odd degree fever and you played and won a playoff game, or you won 6 rings with one team. These are things. You came back from losing your father in a horrific, situation, and out of retirement, it still did your thing. That to me is greatness. There's a fortitude there that's unmatched to this day. And I think it's important for people to understand that. So if we're talking along those levels, I would go with Jordan. But at the end of the day, it's all completely ridiculous because these people played in different times. They were different people. You know what I mean? They were the league was different. The training was different. How someone was trained was different. And so because that would never happen, there's too much focus on it happening, and it's completely ridiculous. There's so many variables at play. You know, people are conditioned a lot differently now than they were back then as well. And, the rules were different. There were so many factors at play that I think it's hard to sit there and be like, well, what if this and what if that? Each generation should be appreciated for what it did during its generation, you know. But the NBA overall has really fallen off as a brand, and I just am not really interested in it. And college football, I have my feelings on that. I do love college football very much. Love it more than the NFL. Um, I think the NIL thing is getting a little out of control. And one day I'd like to really kind of talk about that. I'll probably have Dre on when I talk about that because he's really good at kind of putting that stuff in perspective. You know, contracts and things like that. Like he actually is dope at that. So I'll have to have him on and talk about the NIL business. But I do have my feelings about that. Do I think these kids should get paid? Absolutely. Do I think there should be a transfer portal? Yes and no. I don't think that the transfer portal should be almost like a thing that only opens once a year, and when it does, it's only for a small amount of time. And I know that's the way they kind of way they do it now, but there's too many people allowed to do it. And here's the thing about that: the whole core of college athletics is to build character for the future. You know, no matter what you're taking in school, you know, sports were to build character, you know, and help you develop that don't quit and something to attain for. And when you take something in such a young age of people, these kids are literally still in their developmental stage of who they're going to be when they get out of college or who they're trying to be while they're there. You know, they're still in a developmental stage. And by introducing money into, or this level of it, to where they won't play unless they get into the portal, or if their season doesn't go well, they're going to jump to the portal, or if they're offered this endorsement, or there's going to be lack of development as far as character. And for the most part, there really won't be an incentive to finish school, because for a lot of these people, getting the money is going to get them out of the situation, or get their families out of the situation that they're into. And then sure, they have this money, but the agent doesn't have their special interests at heart. Doesn't have their interests at heart as whether they survive or sustain off that money, how they build it. You know, these kids aren't groomed with how to handle this type of money. They're just groomed on the females and how to handle the rock star lifestyle. You know, but there's no agent or, you know, no accountant assigned to them to, so they go right after the money. And so long term, this is going to be a thing where why go to the NFL when you can make this kind of money here while you're young, you know? Why graduate? Why finish getting your degree? You can save your money unless the contract stipulates they have to fulfill getting their degree. And if someone can clear that up for me, please let me know, because I wonder if there is a stipulation in their contracts, you know. But people also have to avoid conflating getting paid with being a professional. These kids are not professional players just because they're getting paid. They're still kids. Okay. And so that's why I think the way NIL is done needs to be reformed. That's just kind of what I believe. But like I said, I want to have Dre on here because he would love to go back and forth with me about this. So this would be a very interesting conversation. And he'd have some really good input, you know. So with that being said, it's been fun. I just wanted to drop in, do another show real quick. I had some things on my mind. Thought it would be a good idea to just kind of get them out there, you know, and see how y'all are doing. And also thank the new people who have subscribed. And if you haven't yet, please like, share, and subscribe. Somewhere in this area, real soon, you'll see the subscribe button. It'll be my face with my sunglasses. And then it'll be a link to a video here that I would love for y'all to watch. If the timing is off, forgive me. But somewhere in here, there's some things that y'all can help me make happen. With that being said, I appreciate you. Thank you for listening. Peace out.